Afternoon, you're watching the newsroom. My name is Neil Marks. We're bringing to you this afternoon perspectives on elections 2020 on what was expected to be a significant day, the presentation of the report by the Chief Elections Officer to the Chair of the Guyana Elections Commission. Mr. Keith Lowenfield has since done that, and already it is raising eyebrows, the contents of his report. To get initial thoughts, we will talk with attorney at law Sanjeev Datadin, who was an elections agent, participated in the recount, and shocked by this report. Sanjeev?
Good afternoon, Neil. Good afternoon to your viewers. Saying that we're shocked by the report is perhaps an understatement, because there are legal requirements that the Chief Elections Officer has to fulfill. There was an order made by GECOM that said that what the Chief Elections Officer had to do was prepare a report of the numbers, submit it to them so that they can have an idea, and then he would submit a report in accordance with the statute and they would deliberate on it. What this Chief Elections Officer, Mr. Lowenfield, has taken it upon himself to do is to put all of his opinions in. He has included everything that is based on opinion. If you read the report, it says it appears that this is so, that there were complaints being made by APNU agents, but nowhere does he say that he received any evidence. Not that even if he received any evidence, it was his business or his duty or his statutory power to engage in any considerations. That's a matter always for the court. The court, by the Constitution, has the exclusive jurisdiction to do that. It is very clear. The exclusive jurisdiction to determine any issue on the votes, the number of votes to count in an election, is with the High Court of Guyana, which means no other entity, including GECOM, can do it. He went even further, because there has been for about 3 or 4 days, at least of what I noticed, on Facebook and social media, APNU putting out these grids that say there are so many boxes that are tainted. And because of these boxes that are tainted, only this number of boxes are in fact boxes that should count towards the election. I think by doing that, what he's done in region by region, when you look at the report, there are standards of proof that must be met. There are burdens that he who alleged must prove. The chairwoman said that. They must establish these things in a matter of an election petition and have it done. But what Lowenfield is attempting to say is what we can do is he will arrange these anomalies of boxes, he says, that are affected. And as a result of this, he is preparing to declare a whole different election. Region 6, which is a PPP stronghold, if my reading of what he's done, has actually been won by APNU. If you follow what he's doing, that's preposterous. Utterly preposterous.
So, I mean, one of his conclusions is that he can't vouch for the credibility of these results. Do you find that incredible, since he's the one that ran the whole elections and the recount?
Well, he's the one that is principally responsible for $8 billion plus of taxpayers' money being spent on this election. He, as CEO, Chief Elections Officer, is responsible for running this entire election. GECOM, we have to understand, they're like the board. They are above him, but they don't do the day-to-day running of the election. That's his job. So he is in fact saying that what I have done is I have taken $8 billion of taxpayers' money and I have cocked this up, because what I can't say is that I have run a credible election. Then really and truly the police should be speaking to him, and the police should be asking why and how this has occurred, because that is the grossest disregard and an abandonment of your duties for which you were hired to do. But it goes even further. Having done these conclusions and voiced these opinions, why would he do that? It's not his job to do that. In fact, I have had the benefit of seeing 2015 and 2011. I am attempting to find other reports that were done. In 2015, same person. 2011, 2011 it was a different person. Mm-hmm. But in 2015, it was the same person.
He was the deputy in 2015.
Right. and the report that was done has no mention of any of this sort of thing. What the order that GECOM made that was gazetted, the two orders, said that what should happen is he should prepare a summary of the anomalies that are complained about. That summary is simply, you would make a list. That APNU has made 3,000 complaints about migrants voting. Put your summary. But he is taking it upon himself to say that these things that are done and these complaints that are made has infected the election. He's taken away people's votes. No one can do that.
And so, going back to the report and this and what he has presented, I noticed that in the report he pointed to records from the Immigration Department and from the Registrar's Office presenting these death certificates. What do you make of that?
I have no idea who swore him as a judge, and I certainly don't know how he received that information. Now, if we're to take one thing at a time, he has no way to verify the authenticity of any certificate given to him. Whether it is or it isn't a genuine death certificate, I have seen there were 51 death certificates put up by one of the paper journalists that's on Facebook, media, whatever. And he said he did a sample of 48 or 51, and this is what he found. And I have seen all through the night people are saying that they're in fact alive. Now that means he's produced a forged certificate, which is a whole different issue. That's a criminal offense by itself. Now, who presented these certificates to him? What capacity does he have to receive it? I don't know how he received it. He's saying about the police making a response. My understanding, unless I'm mistaken, is that the chairwoman wrote to find out from the police responded to the, I don't know how that became his business or how he became aware of it. I also know that Kaichur News, your good self, other media houses have been highlighting the number of people they find with a certain glee. It has gotten to a number that is so large now that nobody bothers to report it. Everybody accept that, firstly, the Commissioner of Police, I can tell you, had no lawful authority to give that information out as the Chief Immigration Officer. There is no criminal investigation on. So you can't simply release that information. If there was a criminal investigation on, you don't release it to somebody that's not a court. You could release it to a court. So those were the things. So he had no lawful authority to do that. But it's worse. It appears he's released information that's false and that is being proven to be false. But that didn't stop Lowenfield. God forbid that would do that. He took that to be the position that it is. He accepted that this is what it represents. And he says all these anomalies, and this is your result. Now, we had Mingo, one man, undermine the entire election system, and we are here more than 3 months later trying to repair and fix that damage. We now have another single man who's taken it upon himself in the absence of evidence, in the absence of proof, and in the absence of any credible complaint. There is no credible complaint. You have spoken, you were there, and you saw persons who came out and spoke to the media. The APNU representatives would look at the cell phone and call one by one by one. They would randomly pick numbers. And I challenged them to say that the numbers were not randomly picked.
And of course, if Mr. Lowenfield's report were to be taken on board, it means the results of the elections would be changed.
Well, not only the results of the elections, the distribution of seats would be changed. The smaller parties are out, totally out, if you go with what he's trying to say. These things are preposterous. To think that one man would take it upon himself to undo the will of the entire nation because of an agenda or whatever relationship he has with a political party is utterly abhorrent. How did Guyana get here? This is the second time in 3 months we have a man who will not obey the law. I would say that GECOM itself I mean, persons have said there are problems with GECOM and problems with the staff. We have to get to the end of this, but we have to stop having these rogue elements take it upon themselves to come up with things all designed to do what? To thwart the will of the Guyanese people. What GECOM should do is get the numbers of the recount from the tabulation of the 10 regions, have that totaled up. This is a mathematical exercise. I know we're a country that seems to be fearful of mathematical issues, but this has to be totaled up, and in accordance with the law, we have to distribute the seats. This is a very simple thing. He has a very formal, mechanical process by statute to perform. He doesn't have this discretion that he's taken.
So, at the end of the day, Sanjeev, it comes down to the chair of the Elections Commission. The commission is split along party lines. You know where three will vote, you know where the other three will vote. What should she do with this report?
She should disregard it, because this was, as what was put in the order, is that he was supposed to provide a preliminary, and the commission would deliberate to decide for itself whether he should submit a report in accordance with Section 96. So what he should be instructed to do is, please total the numbers, please give us the allocation of seats in accordance with the law. And then GECOM would have to hold their meeting to deliberate on it, and we should have a result. They should make it very clear that he has overstepped his boundary. What he is attempted to do is arrogate unto himself the powers of a court, the powers of the judge to determine it. He's determined what evidence is admissible. He has not heard, and this was one of the things that we have to understand, no objection that was made by any of the opposition party or the smaller parties, the PPPC or any of the other parties, when they objected to the ridiculous observations being made by the APNU reps, they were told that they couldn't object to them making an objection, that they had a right to have their objection recorded. So what happens now? They did not have an opportunity to have any hearing. They were not allowed to present that this is in fact false. I know that various media houses have all information that relates, at my count, I think 24, you were about 6 or 8, and Stabrook News was 17 or 13, something like that. 24 was Kaishore News. So there might be somewhere around 35, 40 at least. I know that if you look at the PPP's Facebook page, there are about another 60 there that they keep uploading all the time. So I don't understand how it was that Lowenfield ignored all of that and moved on to what he did.
Would you say that the commission is duty bound to ask the CEO to present a final report? Because as you said, according to the report, they have to determine whether they will ask him to present another report.
My humble position is, in accordance with law, they should ask him to present a report in accordance with law. Avoid the opinions that he's expressed, avoid the fancy mathematics of removing boxes and what he calls infected ballot boxes and taking away people's vote. This is ridiculous. So he should present whatever the tabulations are for each of the regions, total it up, and he should present that as a report. He can't do anything else. But you know what will happen? If you haven't seen it already, and what will happen over the next 4 or 5 days, is every APNU supporter now believes that there is something to hang their hat on to insist and to continue to try to bully the people of Guyana to accept a government that has not been elected. Because that's what he did by doing that.
And the recount shows the PPP one.
Yes, 15,416 votes.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Neil.
We were talking with Attorney at Law Sanjeev Datadin on the report presented today by the Chief Elections Officer to the Chair of the Elections Commission. You're watching the newsroom. We are continuing updates on the report presented today by the Chief Elections Officer to the Chair of the Elections Commission. It has been over 100 days since Guyanese cast their votes in the general and regional elections. This step was supposed to be almost the final one towards the declaration of a winner. But as we have been reporting, persons are shocked by what has come in the report. And we'd like to talk now with Lenox Shuman, the leader of the Liberty and Justice Party for the LGBTQ. Thank you very much, Lenox, for joining us. Now,
Thanks, Neil.
could I ask you for just your thoughts on the report today? I don't know how much of it you've been able to read.
I read through some of it, and thanks for having me, Neil. I want to say I'm baffled, and you probably think that I've been baffled since elections started, which it seems like I have been, just because of how many ways can you try to rig an election. If you think of it technically, think of it as a game, right? You set the terms of the game, you set when the game is going to play, you set the teams that are going to play in the game, you pick the umpires, and you play the game and you've lost. Even though you would have set all of these things in place, you would have lost. And now, when you go to the score sheet, you say we didn't lose. Now you want to alter the score sheet. And when you're trying to dissect as to why you lost, you couldn't find anything of substance. So what you try to do is invent substance. What Mr. Lowenfield has done is precisely that. He has taken an objective exercise, which is, a person taking their franchise and exercising that, their constitutional right, and inserted subjective matter into it. I was reading through the report. If you look at the amount of people that they claim were out of the jurisdiction, the jurisdiction would potentially mean what? You're out of the country. I think that's what I interpret it to be. But when you look at the substance of the matter, is that many of those things were false. My community, for example, had 6 people who are supposedly out of the jurisdiction, yet only 2 of them were out. And one of them is my cousin, who has been sick and been in the community for however long. When we started off this process, we knew on the 6th of May, when we walked into Artichon Convention Center, I think I uttered the words that this year is going to be mass chaos. Not only the recon process, but everything that is part of the recon process. And I said that because I also made the statement that they could not address the Mingo issue. They could not rig the results. So what they will do is try to undermine the electoral process. And that is precisely what they were trying to do with this report.
So what should happen with it?
At this point, I would think that Mr. Lowenfield needs to submit his resignation for incompetence, gross incompetence, if the report is in fact true. If there is anything objective in the report, I think Mr. Lowenfield and the entire Guyana Elections Commission need to immediately submit their resignation for having wasted $8 billion of taxpayers' money, having dragged this country through 90 plus days, close to 100 days of electoral process. It shows that they're grossly incompetent. And the report, in my view, has no place within this objective exercise. All you're trying to do, and if you read the report, it talks about one party alleges this. There is only one political party that made allegations in the recount exercise, and that was the APNU-AFC. They had no proof, and we asked for them to provide the proof, and even when we offered objections to their objections, those were not taken on board. Take, for example, when we came up to the Mingo boxes, we said we would like for it to be recorded in these objection reports that these numbers that are being declared do not correlate to the numbers that Mingo declared previously. And those objections were not taken on board. We didn't have much objections. And none of those things were taken on board. And I think the media had done a fantastic job in terms of asking the APNU-AFC to provide proof, which, to my knowledge, I don't think that they have provided that proof to the public yet. So what you've taken is all of these allegations and giving it legs in this sense. I saw Mr. Datadin was in here talking about you're giving the AP and UFC supporters something to hold on to. That is precisely what they're doing. There isn't any way that they won these elections, so they're trying to now find a way to energize their supporters to come out and say that these things were wrong. All along, what they're doing is just fooling their supporters.
I want to ask you about the certificates that were produced just after every district were counted. After every district was counted, you had a certificate that was produced. You had 10 of them, all of them be saying that the figures on them were verified from the statements of recount. As far as your recollection goes, were all of those statements of recounts, that might be unfair, but most of the statements of recount that you saw, were these signed off by APNU plus FC?
I think one of them was, if I remember correctly, because remember Mr. Daniel Siram was in there
No, I
signing.
didn't mean the certificates, I meant the statements of recount.
The SORs. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes, they were. All of the SORs were signed off by the AP and UFC that we have in our possession. There are some regions that we did not contest in, 4 regions. So we don't know if they signed those off, but we know that the ones within the regions that we contested in, that all of those SORs were signed off by AP and UFC.
So therefore, if all 10 of these certificates were produced and signed off by the district supervisor, I don't remember if that's the correct word, saying that these were the valid votes, should there be any question about them?
In my view, no. The Constitution protects our right to exercise our franchise. That is our democratic right. So for someone to come now and say that, Lenox Shuman, your vote is no longer valid just because someone alleged that you use a pen instead of a pencil, those things are baseless. It should not impact my franchise. And once again, it is only an allegation. You cannot now take an allegation as fact. If that is the case, why do we have a court of law? You can't just show up to the court and say, well, I allege that Neil Marks did something, and then they lock you up and throw you in jail. There must be a process that it goes through where that allegation now comes with proof. That proof is taken before the court, and then the court pronounces on that. So what Mr. Lowenfield has attempted to do is make himself not only party to the party that is accusing everyone, but also now becomes the police and the judge and everything, the prosecutor, you name it all. So he has granted upon himself all of these titles to now say that the elections cannot be valid or something to that extent, which is, you couldn't be farther from the truth.
Do you believe that he has stepped outside of the mandate that he was given by the commission, which is to basically add up these votes and submit a summary of the reports, the observation reports?
In my view, and based on the legal advice that we have from our independent counsel, is that he has most definitely overstepped. You've taken an objective exercise once again and inserted subjective matter into it. A summary of the report should have been that, there is one political party that alleged something, but there has been no evidence to support it. I was reading in Region 6, for example, 1,121 people accused of being out of the jurisdiction. I have not seen any proof to that effect, and we are stakeholders in this political cycle. I think Culture News have done some fantastic articles going to search for these people and finding them. We haven't seen that. We know that there's a list that was presented to the Guyana Elections Commission. I think there were 6 separate lists, right? Well, 6 separate sheets comprising 2 lists. And I don't think that those lists went above maybe 400. So how now do you take a list, and most of those things were debunked by the PPP, I think. But how now do you take that list of 400 and change and say there were 1,121 out of the jurisdiction when nothing was asked for? Who is doing the investigation? If you read through the report, it also says that the party says that based on their investigation, that these are the things that are there. Now, are you now permitting political parties to go beyond their mandate, as is prescribed in Article 161 of the Constitution? The Constitution clearly lays out the roles of political parties. Now, what you're permitting that political party to do is to overstep and inject itself into this constitutional body. I mean, if there was no suspicion before, I think it is clear how far the tentacles go.
So, what do you believe should happen with the report? Should the commission consider it? Should they use the general count that was given, which reflects the recount figures, and declare a winner, or should they ask Lowenfield to do another report?
Well, I think they have to decide on this, what's happening right now. The report has been submitted. They've got a few days
3 days
to deliberate on it. And after that, they have to ask him to produce a second report, which will be either voted in favor or not in favor of moving forward. So it's just to permit the process to go. I think Madam Chair, in her capacity as a previous judge, would look at the legal context of things and say, all right, well, you know what, this does not withstand the legal test, so we can or cannot have it. And I think we have to trust her wisdom and judgment and training.
So what do you think her declaration should be?
I don't want to influence Madam Chair's position, so I think at this point it would be prudent to wait a bit. But were I to ask for the Liberty and Justice Party, because I know, based on the numbers that Mr. Lowenfield put out there, is that all the small parties have pretty much been washed out, if you look at it. But I think that at this juncture, based on the legal guidance that we have once again, is that there could be nothing that prohibits her from accepting the figures from the recount and saying that's what it is.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We've been talking with Mr. Lenox Shuman, the leader of the Liberty and Justice Party, as we continue to bring you perspectives from the report submitted today by the Chief Elections Officer to the Chair of the Guyana Elections Commission.